Alrighty, let's go ahead and get going. I imagine we're going to have more people jump on the call shortly. My name is Megan Andy. I have recently joined Friends of Clark County to partner with them on some of their event work and fundraising, and I'm thrilled to be working with them. I've learned all kinds of new things. I had no idea that Willie Nelson had ever been in this community. I would just like to start with, we are recording all of this meeting for the sake of sharing it with people who weren't able to join us today. So if you're not comfortable having your image recorded, I encourage you to turn off your video. For now, everyone will be muted except for presenters. And towards the middle of the meeting, we'll move everybody into breakout rooms, and at that point, we will unmute you all. If you have any questions for our presenters, please do send them via chat, and I will act as host. And I just wanted to let you know, so what we're doing is we're starting with Sue Marshall, who's the president of Friends of Clark County, and she'll talk about land use and the Growth Management Act. Sirk Brahm with Housing Initiatives LLC will then be joining us for discussion around affordable housing. Then we'll move everybody into breakout rooms. And you will each be joined by a board member of Friends of Clark County to help facilitate that conversation. In the end, we will gather back to discuss. Unfortunately, we're not going to have a ton of time today to get to questions, but after the end of the call, we will, at the end of the call, anybody who's interested is welcome to stay on for another 15 minutes, where Sue and Sirk will be available to answer questions informally. So at this time, I'd like to start by introducing Sue Marshall. She is the president of Friends of Clark County and Heritage Farm Hero. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Sue. Hold on. You're muted. Why is it being mean? Why is this not letting me? Sue, can you try unmuting yourself? There you go. We got you.
Okay, great. I was trying, but it wasn't letting me do that. So thanks everyone for coming. I'm not sure if I can actually see everyone, but
in the top right-hand corner, Sue, you can go to gallery view.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll just know you're there. Anyway, thanks for joining us. I have a quick 15 minutes, and this doesn't need to be the first or last time we all get together. But I want to tell you a little bit about Friends of Clark County and our work, give you an overview of the Growth Management Act and land use planning, and touch on the upcoming revision of Clark County's comprehensive plan. And I'd also like to talk about opportunities for involvement. But before I get started with all of that, I'd like to just take a moment to acknowledge that land ownership, policies and practices related to land use has a legacy very much of inequity and injustice. There has been systemic racism from the usurping of indigenous people's lands and the devastating impact that had to discrimination in housing, in lending, in economic investment. And this systemic discrimination has very much been the basis of economic disparity for people of color. So I think that's a good place to start in acknowledging it in order to address it. And Friends of Clark County, it's our hope that we can instill a measure of fairness in the process and advocate for people who aren't usually at the table to have more of an involvement in that. So I'm going to share the screen here with my presentation. Whoop, I think I need to go, no, I think, yeah, that's right. Okay, I'm set. I got involved with Friends of Clark County about 5 years ago. My husband and I moved out to our family farm in Ridgefield, Washington, kind of our working retirement. And at that time, Clark County was really in the last stages of the comprehensive plan revision. When I began to learn more about what was being proposed, it was alarming to me. And you know, I was afraid that for all of our hard work and investment in the farm, that it could result in us being surrounded with a lot of 1 acre parcels. And the conflicts that arise for an agricultural operation make it really difficult to operate. So I looked around and noticed Friends of Clark County seemed to be the only organization really effectively pushing back on some of the proposals. So I got involved with them, and kind of long story short, Friends of Clark County, with the legal assistance of FutureWise, appealed the comprehensive plan at that time, and we're able to protect over 35,000 acres of farmland and nearly 5,000 acres of forest land. Friends of Clark County got started in 1996, promoting responsible growth, generally curbing sprawl. We're an all-volunteer organization, except for Megan, who helps us out, as she mentioned. Clark County is especially susceptible to development pressure, given our proximity to the greater Portland area, and that it was 20 years after Oregon adopted their growth management that the state of Washington adopted theirs. But it was the first comprehensive planning process that got Friends of Clark County started. We have largely focused on environmental issues, but I think now, and with the help of CIRC, are interested in moving more in looking at urban issues and issues of equity as important counterpoints to protection of the rural lands. Let's see, how do I advance here? I'm not seeing that. Oh, here we go. So I, when I was in Oregon, worked on environmental policy and had a couple of legislative sessions working for the Senate Environment and Natural Resources Committee. And so I like to, and also as a active citizen, like to understand the underpinnings of this policy because it's helpful in figuring out how you can be most effective. So I thought I'd start with the passage of Washington's Growth Management Act, which occurred in 90 and 91, and looking at their findings. These are the findings, their legislative findings. So they, and it took a good 20 years of wrangling before this was adopted, so it was controversial, but at the time, Puget Sound area was really experiencing a lot of the negative impacts of unplanned growth. So the findings to that uncoordinated, unplanned growth, lack of common goals, pose a threat to not just the environment, but sustainable economic development, health, safety, and the quality of life. And that it is in the public's interest that citizens, communities, government cooperate and coordinate with one another. We all have something at stake in this, and we need to all work together to come up with a plan. And that it was further in the legislature's interest that the public, that economic development programs be shared with communities experiencing insufficient economic growth. So they were looking at some measure of equity as they were moving forward. So here are the goals. I got them all on one sheet here. Now there's a lot of language that goes along with each of these goals, but here are the 13 goals. And for Friends of Clark County, there may be half of these that we've really tried to address. It's a lot for one organization take on. But the reducing sprawl, natural resource industry, protection, open space, recreation, environment, citizen participation, and public facilities, I would say, are the primary ones that we've been addressing. But there is something for everyone here, and you don't need to take everything on. You can just pick what you're most interested in. I added the Shoreline Management Act. It was actually adopted some 20 years before the GMA and is considered to be a 14th goal, although it operates on a different timeline. So, 13 goals. Oh, and of those, wait, I think I'm missing something here. Oh, dip, dip. I'm missing one. Well, I just want, the slide I'm missing is there's required elements. So there's all these 13 goals, but there are some elements that are, they are really serious about that these comprehensive plans really need to address. And that's the land use element, which is really how do you look at the landscape? Where's the agriculture, forest, mineral resources, where rural lands, where urban lands, and that there needs to be both a rural identity that surrounds cities, so that the cities, there's a sense of spatial identity. I think if you drive around, you can just look and see, do you get a sense of spatial identity for any one of the cities in Clark County? And that there was a need to meet the infrastructure needs. It's parks, schools, water, transportation, and transportation in particular. There's a requirement that it must, entity must demonstrate how transportation needs will be met prior to allowing any new development. This is called concurrency. So the land use, the meeting infrastructure needs are part of the required elements, as is accommodating affordable housing. And this is exactly what it says about accommodating affordable housing. So it should be data driven. There should be provisions for housing needs of all economic segments of the community, that there be sufficient lands, and all these different kinds of housings need to be addressed. That there's a requirement the counties and the cities need to be regionally responsible in accommodating their share of affordable housing. For example, we can't look at the city of Vancouver to bear all of the responsibility for affordable housing. All of the cities and the county need to be responsible for that. And the act implies that they all must bear a fair share of regional housing needs. Although there is a caveat here, they fail really to define how that is met. But that's the backdrop. Now here I have how the GMA works on one slide. Again, I'm very proud of myself for this. And I would just say there's a lot of detail. This is very complex. This is meant just to be an overview. There are opportunities to get more engaged with all of this, including participating with Friends of Clark County. But the GMA counties, 18 of the 39 counties are required to participate in comprehensive planning and wrangle with all those 13 goals and addressing the required elements. the GMA is administered by the Department of Commerce. I mentioned this just because the Department of Commerce has a great deal of information. You can go online and find all manner of information. And it's the State Office of Financial Management that sets up population estimates. That's usually high, medium, and low, and the local jurisdiction can select from high, medium, low. The last comprehensive plan, we picked medium, so it's yet to be determined what those numbers are for this upcoming round of comprehensive planning. And here's something I think is very important. The local jurisdictions are given a great deal of deference in determining how to apply these goals and required elements. And that the plan is considered, the comprehensive plan is considered to be valid and in effect once approved by the local jurisdiction. They are not submitting it to any state agency to get the okay. Once they vote locally on their plan, that's in effect. There was a couple rounds of Growth Management Act legislation, and I think in the second round, there was a realization that maybe there needs to be some level of, or some means of accountability, and they set up an appeals process and designated 3 regional Growth Management Act hearing boards, and that so that people and entities can appeal a comprehensive plan if they don't like it, and then wait for the hearings board to make a determination. If the hearings board determines that what the local jurisdiction did was invalid, well then they have to go back to address the concerns of the hearing board, and the plan is no longer in effect. It's actually violating state law at that point. So there's a hearings board, and there's also a means to go to the Court of Appeals, and maybe there's other legal wranglings that can occur, but people are probably worn out by that point. And then the other, some teeth that was instituted was sanctions, and the governor has the ability, if they determine, to withhold state funding if there is a recalcitrant jurisdiction that just isn't going to budge on things. And so comprehensive planning in Clark County. Let me move my page here. So periodic review occurs for the comprehensive plan occurs about every 8 years. Sometimes there's delays or extensions. Revision of Clark County's comprehensive plan is due in 2025 and submitted to the Department of Commerce. 2025 may sound like a long time away, and there hasn't been a schedule published yet on how these components are all going to come together. But I will say that there are some that are underway now. With 13 goals, you can imagine there's a lot of components to pull together. I want to highlight public engagement. Each of the components of the comprehensive plan may have their own public engagement plan. And the public engagement plans themselves, they are subject to public engagement so that people can comment on, how well the public engagement plan, for example, addresses people who may not have barriers to participation if there's special outreach. There's a number of things. It's worthwhile to weigh in on the public engagement plans, but some of the components could be surveys or open houses, stakeholder groups, and so things ruminate around on these levels, and then something gets more formally presented to the Planning Commission, and there are work sessions and public hearings, and that the public can participate in. And then the Planning Commission makes a recommendation to the County Council. And again, there's another round of work sessions and public hearings. And sometimes things loop through a couple of times. And as I mentioned, important for the public, for your interest to be represented at those public hearings, because that then becomes the basis of any potential appeal to the Growth Management Hearings Board. And so I just wanted to really highlight important role for the community, and that you need to raise the issue or you waive it. The Growth Management Hearing Board will look at issues that came up during the public process. And it may be your issue, or it could be someone else's issues, but the collective issues that were raised can be appealed. But if you're silent, then not represented. So what's underway right now? There's a Buildable Lands Committee that was set up by the county, and their task is to make a recommendation on identifying lands that will be needed in the next 20 years for residential, commercial, and industrial development. This is a requirement under the Growth Management Act that there be this 20-year supply of land. The Parks Department is revising the Parks Master Plan. They currently have a survey that you could participate online that runs through the end of August. So that is like a first step in their public process for the revision of the Parks Master Plan. And the housing element for the county, and let me just say, the county is going through this process. The cities will go through a process as well, and it all gets wrapped up in one comprehensive plan for the county and the cities. The housing element, the county is currently looking at the unincorporated area that is within the growth boundary of the city of Vancouver. It's a large area, and the population represented is almost comparable to the city of Vancouver itself. So they have done some stakeholder surveys, and there will be more of a public process articulated and opportunities to weigh in, and certainly timely for the subject today. And the Shoreline Management Master Program, again, it's operating on its an independent cycle, and has already gone through a number of public engagement elements, but they're poised to have a planning commission work session on the Shoreline Management Master Program on August 6th, and then a public hearing on August 20th. And just to explain that a wee bit, this would be to regulate how development may occur or may not occur within proximity to rivers, lakes, and wetlands. So we have a lot of rivers, lakes, and wetlands in Clark County. So there's a lot of things that are in the works. Friends of Clark County try to track these as best we can. You can stay informed through the Clark County grid. It's the, and you can link into any one of the departments. You can get involved with your local neighborhood association. Some neighborhood associations aren't active, and maybe there's a special role for you in that. And then Friends of Clark County, get involved with Friends of Clark County. We have a newsletter that goes out every other month, and timely alerts on things and forums like this, and volunteer opportunities. We could get involved with more of the GMA goals if we had a few more people, say, who had a special interest in transportation or parks. Those are a couple of areas we need to expand, and affordable housing for that matter. And I would just say it's very much worth your while to get involved. And I just leave this last slide as an example Friends of Clark County and FutureWise jointly appealed the 2016 County Comprehensive Plan and succeeded. Well, we appealed 3 times to the Growth Management Hearings Board and prevailed on some of our issues. And then it went to the appeals court, but long story short, we succeeded in drawing back of a proposed expansion of Battlegrounds urban growth area, protected the agricultural lands and the forest lands, and adopted policies that impact over 100,000 acres of rural land that prevents densities from being doubled or quadrupled without a comprehensive plan amendment. So this gives the community more of a voice in these decisions. And we prevented the de-designation of 602 acres of prime agricultural land in the Brush Prairie area. So that's a whole lot to lay on you. But within all of that, there's a place for everybody, I hope, to get more involved.
Sue, thank you so much for contributing your amazing thoughts and information. I'm really excited that we have so many people interested in getting involved with growth management in Clark County. Now I'd like to introduce Sirk Brahm from the Housing Initiatives LLC. It is a child LLC of Council for the Homeless, who, as most of you know, is doing outstanding work in the community around people experiencing homelessness and long-term housing solutions. So, Sirk, if you are ready, I can't find you. Okay, hold on, I gotta find Sirk. Oh, there he is. Sorry about that.
That's okay. So am I unmuted? Everybody can hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
All right, let me see now if I can do a share screen. Is that share screen working for folks?
Yep.
All right. Well, hi, it's kind of late in the day. I'm not usually talking to this many people this late, or it's been a while since I was on a roadshow tour about affordable housing issues. So by way of background, we are a subsidiary of the Council for the Homeless. And we came about through kind of a long conversation that we had both at the board level at the Council for the Homeless, where I'd been a board member previously, and other players in the community. And in 2014, the Council for the Homeless sort of launched an affordable housing initiative, and it was really to study the root causes of the skyrocketing rents in Vancouver and Clark County and the severe housing shortage. And I'm not going to go into the details of that report, but the sort of the recommendations that came out of that were that the community create a political and regulatory environment for housing affordability, that we work to increase the capacity to finance affordable housing, and also the intellectual capacity to build it and develop it. And then thirdly, that we increase the capacity for mission-driven property management and really mission-driven ownership entities. This led to the creation in 2016 of Housing Initiative as this development arm for the Council for the Homeless. And it was really created to try to address those folks that were really being left behind or out of the private rental market. And they were being left out by many things, but some of those barriers were things, when landlords had lots of choice because there was a very, very tight rental market, people were being left behind because of things on their rental history, evictions, bad credit, criminal histories, possibly. Sometimes just the fact that they were coming to the table with a rental voucher. And a lot of these folks may indeed also have had behavioral mental health issues, and what some of you might have heard referred to as the chronically homeless. And it's the chronically homeless and folks exiting homelessness that's really the focus of the housing initiative. There are other nonprofits that are also developing affordable housing that may focus on seniors or families. We tend to focus really on those people exiting homelessness. So I think we're probably going to have several conversations. And today, really what I thought I'd do is give a broad overview, and starting with maybe some definitions of affordable housing to give that a little bit of context. And something that, an acronym that comes up often, AMI, for Area Median Income, is, it's taken from the census, updated every 5 years. They do it by estimate, and then every 10 years the census gets redone. And usually when people just throw it around loosely, AMI, they're referring to the area median income for a family of 4. And in the Portland, Vancouver area, that's around $92,000. Then HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development at the federal level, determines that a family of 4 is low income if they're earning 80% of that. And they're considered a very low income if they're earning 50% of that number. And they're extremely low income if they're earning 30% of that. So to give that a bit of context, a family of 4 in the city of Vancouver or the Portland, Vancouver MSA, at 30% of AMI, that family of 4 is earning $27,650 or less. Or to paint a slightly different picture, maybe a family of 2, it could be a single mother with a child, is extremely low income if they are earning $22,000 a year as their income. And when we talk about housing affordability, the experts, is that for housing to be affordable, you are paying no more than 30% of your income for rent and utilities. So here's a couple national numbers, and they're pretty much the same for us here in Clark County. About 26% of renter households are extremely low income. And of those very low income folks, most of those people are what you would call very heavily rent burdened, meaning they are spending, just to find somewhere to live, they're spending more than 50% of their income just on rent. And this is an old slide, but the numbers haven't changed all that much. So for every 100 extremely low income households or renters in Washington, for those households, there are only 30 rental units that are affordable. And in Oregon, it's 26. So there's a shortage there. To bring that to a more local level, we've got 160,000 households roughly in Clark County, 32,000 low-income renter households. And for those 32,000 low-income renter households, we only have 6,500 publicly subsidized units. So everybody else is trying to find affordable housing on the private market. And as you can imagine, because it's been in the press, there are not a lot of apartments available. And even though the rental market seems to be softening a bit, the softening in the market tends to be at the very high end of the rental pool, not at the lower end of the rental pool, which is really the folks that we are concerned about. Again, to give this some context, so $92,000 is the area median income for a family of four. Family of four might want to rent a 3-bedroom apartment, and the rent for a 3-bedroom apartment, the fair rents in our area are a little over $2,000. The rents that are fair market rents for a 2-bedroom apartment is almost $1,500 in our area. And what that looks like is the following. So at minimum wage, $13.50 an hour, you're working at McDonald's. And you're working 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, right? So you're not taking 2 weeks off for vacation. You're going to earn about $28,000 a year. And if you're not going to spend more than 30% of your income on rent, you can afford $702 a month to pay your rent. So that FMR that you can afford at $702 compared to the fair market rents at $1,495 paint a fairly bleak picture of the affordable housing crisis we've got locally, and it's true nationally on both coasts. So if we think about that, you have maybe a single parent working minimum wage. They've got 2 kids. They're going to sleep in one room. The 2 kids are going to share the other bedroom. They will pay their rent of $1,495. That person then has $845 left for the rest of the month to pay for their car insurance, their food, medical bills, and possibly also childcare, which at an average of $225 a week in Vancouver would eat up the rest of that money. And it all sounds really bleak, but I'm just trying to give folks a sense of the numbers that we're talking about when we talk about incomes and affordability. And I'm perfectly happy to send out, I've got a bunch of one-page flyers or reports or fact sheets that I can send out. I didn't want to send them out beforehand because I didn't want everybody to read everything and then I'd have nothing left to say and everybody would just be bored. But I'm perfectly willing to share those, in the next few days if you really want to try to digest all of this. So that is income and affordability. So that leads to the barriers to building affordable housing. There are some sort of easy to digest or easy to understand barriers. Labor costs are high, and they, about 2.5 years ago, the labor costs increased 25 to almost 30% within a 6-month period. That had a big impact on the cost of building affordable housing. Material costs have increased significantly in the last few years. In some of these situations, especially when you're building housing that has public financing from the federal government or state and sometimes local sources, there are administrative overhead costs that really add to the cost of building publicly funded affordable housing. And the irony there is that there's the real administrative overhead cost, as you can imagine, dealing with a bunch of paperwork and government regulation. And I don't mean that cynically, I mean that's there. What's unfortunate is that sometimes it also indirectly drives up your costs because you will have subcontractors that won't bid on your job because they don't want the headache of the paperwork. Or if they do bid on it, they're going to increase their costs enough to pay for staff to work through all of that paperwork. And then there are costs of financing. Now, financing today is cheap, right? I mean, the context of this whole conversation is somewhat interesting because of our current national political environment and the COVID crisis and what that's going to do to obviously rates and unemployment and what have you. But financing can be something that is a barrier to building affordable housing, not just in rates, but in the costs to hold land and those sorts of things. The other barriers to building affordable housing are the lack of buildable land. And I realize this is, I don't want people to throw tomatoes at me. This is not the group that's going to like this as a bullet point, and it's not the one I'm going to focus on, but growth boundaries do lead to higher land costs. But so does wetland regulation. So does topography. You can't build on cliff sides, you know, and we live in a part of the country where there's not a lot of flat land. In Southwest Washington, we have a lot of wetland, and outside of the regulation, it's expensive to build on wet soil. But where I think our opportunity lies in the context of the Growth Management Act is to talk about lack of buildable land and land constraints within the context of zoning. Because really, if we can take a creative look at the zoning codes and land use regulations as they relate to zoning, the stroke of a pen can create buildable land for apartments or higher density single family homes, if you will. And we don't have to expand a growth boundary to necessarily accomplish an increase in buildable land. So we have to take a large systems change point of view to try to create more affordable housing. And there's a lot of things that are going to be able to impact affordable housing, including, you know, I mean, urban growth and containing urban growth. If you contain urban growth, we have fewer costs in infrastructure. If we can contain urban growth, we have fewer costs in transportation infrastructure. If we can reduce sprawl, which also means creating higher densities, we again have some savings that are maybe to large public systems, again, transportation and infrastructure costs. But along with restricting that sprawl or controlling urban growth, we are going to have to, I think, also help the building industry fight for some changes in zoning, and in some cases fight for some changes in building codes. So what we want to do is encourage local policies that can help spur the development of affordable housing, revisiting land use policies and zoning codes that hinder development, and they hinder development either outright or by simply increasing the cost of construction through regulation. We can promote inclusionary zoning, and I'm using that term somewhat loosely, but encouraging multiple housing types as opposed to single housing types. So the opposite of inclusionary zoning would be exclusionary zoning. And, you know, exclusionary zoning can take many different forms. A lot of times it's done with minimum lot sizes. And sometimes it's done somewhat more cynically through homeowners associations and requirements for certain material types when you're building. And then cities can be quite exclusionary without even having to touch the zoning code by simply in their building code requiring, in some cases, it could be minimum square footages that they require. It could be that they need sprinkler systems hooked into a fire department that added costs. So there are things outside of zoning and in the building code which some government bodies put into their code, and those are exclusionary often case. So those are things we might want to look at. Regulatory incentives. So we can talk about fee waivers and expedited permitting. These are sort of the droll things that builders and developers might find interesting. Density bonuses, if we had developers, whether it's building a subdivision or an apartment complex, that if you're hitting certain affordability thresholds so that everybody gets to live in your community, that you get possibly density bonuses, so to be able to build more units. We might want to increase our high density zoning code the way it's currently written. We might want to increase lot sizes for single family development so that we can have more opportunity for starter homes. That's to address affordability for the home ownership component of this. And I tend not to focus on that, but builders are not building many houses under $300,000. And when that's your starter home, that's not really what one would call affordable housing. That's very different from how housing has been built in the past. Reduced parking requirements. Whenever I look at a piece of land, to determine what I can build on a piece of land or how many units I can build, and that has a great impact for me on the cost per unit, the first thing I have to look at is how many cars can I park on that piece of land. Even if the people that I am building for are too poor to own vehicles, a lot of my development costs are first driven by how much parking I need, and only secondarily driven by how many units the community might actually need for affordable housing. And so as part of a look at zoning, the idea of having zoning coordinate a little bit more with public transportation infrastructure would be critical. I think eliminating single-family zoning as a category is something that the group could look at. And eliminating single-family zoning as a category doesn't mean that you make single-family homes illegal. It simply means that you can allow a developer to look at a neighborhood or a large parcel of land and determine that he might build some single-family homes, but he or she may also build a duplex or a fourplex or a sixplex. Those are attractive things. Those are things that make, for many people, urban neighborhoods attractive, is that mix of housing type that we've essentially eliminated by a rather sort of monochrome zoning code that's been adopted throughout the country. Oregon recently eliminated the single-family zoning. Minneapolis, the city of Minneapolis has done it. And the state of Washington has looked at it at the state level. It hasn't really gotten quite enough traction yet, but if local groups like Friends of Clark County start pushing back or advising on the GMA regulation, I think this is something that would be worth looking at and educating ourselves on. And then allowing multifamily housing in commercial zones. This is a way to also be able to make certainly multifamily housing somewhat more affordable. And to shed a little more light on that, Housing Initiative was able to run a pilot with the city at one time to have them eliminate a commercial requirement when we were building affordable housing on a commercial parcel. And the reason that was important was on multiple levels. One is when I'm building subsidized housing, if I have to mix a commercial component in there, the financing becomes exponentially more difficult. It's also space that's difficult for me to lease up. And it's not, for me, maximizing the affordable housing units I could build. And there was conversation for this pilot project to change the zoning on that parcel to multifamily. But that's not what we wanted. We wanted to keep the commercial zone because the commercial zone had laxer parking requirements in this case because it was in a transportation overlay. It also did not have maximum housing densities like multifamily zoning does. And thirdly, every developer and their uncle is competing for the few multifamily zoned parcels that are available. And they're not generally looking at secondary quality commercial sites. So I can't afford the prime sites, but I can afford secondary commercial sites that are being underutilized. And so this was a way for us to both be able to compete for the land, just to be able to buy it. And then actually, I would argue, put underutilized commercially zoned land back on the tax rolls.
Sirik, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we do need to wrap up so that we can move into our breakout groups very briefly, just to give people time to kind of process their thoughts.
Well, lucky for me, can I just give you my last slide?
I suppose.
So you can read it for yourself, but I mean, housing is a fundamental human right, in my opinion, and we have an affordable housing crisis, and I think we can all work together to at least work on the problem, even if we can't solve it in our lifetimes. That's it.
All right, Sirik, thank you so much for contributing your thoughts. What I'm going to do at this time is invite everybody to join us in breakout groups. So I've moved you all into groups that you'll be put in shortly. Each of you has a board member joining you who will help facilitate. The question I'm asking you to ponder today is the growth management and affordable housing has broad impacts on quality of life in Clark County. I want to know how you think these issues apply to you. And if you could just, as you discuss these, maybe send the highlights out to us via chat. We'll hit on some of those when we regroup. Unfortunately, we won't be able to bring everybody back together completely to do so. But I think it'll be great to hear from people. In addition to that, I'm going to send a follow-up question that I will ask you to respond to via chat shortly. I look forward to hearing from all of you. All right, everybody. Well, I appreciate.
That wasn't very long.
No, I'm sorry, it wasn't. So what I'm going to ask everybody to do is, if you are interested, please do join us after the end of the formal call. Sue and Sirik are both going to be available for questions. However, we do want to be respectful of your time. So what I'm going to do now is just give you a few closing thoughts. First of all, I want to ask that anybody who has not already made sure that we have your email address, please do so, so that I can get information out to you after the fact, including the recording of this program and other things, other materials that Sue and Sirik have made available to us. I also want to ask that you consider making a contribution to Friends of Clark County or Council for the Homeless. Right now, I am sending the links for those two. Friends of Clark County is going to continue doing advocacy work in the Growth Management Act realm and are going to continue focusing on topics like affordable housing, conservation, heritage farms, and transportation. And I'm just so thrilled to be a part of the team now. Really outstanding board led by Sue Marshall, who you just heard from. And of course, Council for the Homeless remains at the forefront of addressing homelessness in Clark County. So please do consider making a contribution to either one of those two organizations. Now, for those of you who have to go, we're sorry to see you go. For those who would like to stay and ask questions, please do. I'll be keeping the call open until 5:15. Sue or Sirik, do you want to lead us off? It looks like I don't have any formal questions.
This is Brooke. Can you hear me?
Hey, Brooke, what's up?
Hi. So I am new to the Vancouver area. I've only been here a little over a year now. But I had not heard of Friends of Clark County until just recently. I'm going to visit the website, but I'd like to get more information. I'm a little time constrained, so I have to be going to my next meeting for the day. But I would love to maybe speak with somebody to get some more information and maybe to connect and get some more insight. I would really appreciate that. Thanks.
Brooke, since I already have your contact information, I'd be happy to reach out and talk more about that.
Awesome. Thank you, Megan.
No problem. Did we have any other questions?
I have a question.
What's up?
I have a question for Sue. Sue, you right there?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, and one of your slides, and one of your last slides, you had referenced a piece of the conversation that's going on now regarding unincorporated areas of Clark County versus city expansion.
Right.
Or maybe I'm assuming city expansion. So that it sort of hit close to home just because Salmon Creek is within the unincorporated, is considered an unincorporated Clark County. So how, if you or Sir can describe what the thought process is, I was unclear as to where you were going on your slide with that reference point.
What I think you're talking about that I was referencing is the county, Clark County, is looking at housing, and the area they're looking at, it's the unincorporated area of the city of Vancouver. You know, the city of Vancouver's growth boundary goes all the way beyond the fairgrounds. It goes way out to like 209th or something. It's way out.
Okay.
And so it's not that the city of Vancouver is looking at expanding or annexing that I'm aware of, but this is just Clark County wanting to address housing needs in this area. It'd be, you know, Hazeldale, Salmon Creek, you know, just all of the areas north of the current city of Vancouver incorporated area.
Okay. Okay.
To cover that boundary area. They've just started. There's a link on the website, and they haven't really developed their public engagement plan. So it's just very much in the early stages, but interesting to look at on the website because it shows that really huge area that is unincorporated and within a future growth boundary for
Okay.
the city of Vancouver. So it's one of those things that I don't know how it got expanded that far out. I don't think it was really something the city of Vancouver was looking for, but it's what we have to live with.
Sue, I just posted a link
Hi, Chuck.
to it's called the Housing Options Study.
Right, great.
And what they're looking at is the unincorporated area that's within the Vancouver urban growth area. So the gray that you'll see on that map, and I'll see if I can pull it up here.
So it's, well, that helps explain when you use urban growth boundary as a delineator too, Chuck. So.
Yes, and so I don't,
Yeah.
Can you see it on your screens?
Can do.
That's the housing options study. It just kind of, it got started and then this thing called COVID hit. So it's really affected the ability to progress this. But Jackie Camp, I noticed, was on the call earlier. She would be the Clark County planner that's in charge of this. And it just happens, I'm the vice chair of the Commission on Aging, and Jackie is our liaison for that group. And I have a meeting with her and Larry Smith next week to talk about our next Commission on Aging meeting, but I can bring up that question of where things are and how the Friends of Clark County can get involved with that. It's a pretty good opportunity when you talk about affordable housing in the unincorporated area, because essentially they haven't.
Yes.
And I also want to point out that affordable housing is not just in terms of low income younger families or single families, but also applies to fixed income, which is where the Commission on Aging comes in. It's a big deal.
So I was just going to say, we have another question, Heather, before we jump to you. We did have a question come in through chat. Sirk, I think this one's probably being put to you. What is the single most important thing that the Clark County Council can do to help lower costs within the next 2 years? And that was from Jesse James.
I think it'll be very difficult for the county to lower costs. but I think that the county could consider creating ways to fund this, much like the city of Vancouver put together a levy for affordable housing development. I think the county could consider something similar. And I think revisiting our zoning code.
Heather, you had a question?
Yeah, this is a clarifying question, probably for Sirk. If I heard you correctly, my takeaway from what you said was that really affordable housing at this point in terms of the system that's in place actually means multifamily housing. That given what's the cost of land and building right now, that there really isn't affordable single family housing to be built. Did I get that right? Is that?
It is very difficult to build single family for sale housing that would fall within standard definitions of affordable.
All right. All right.
Ron Barca has some thoughts. He wanted to talk a little bit about the unincorporated areas question.
Yeah, thank you. I think for this group, I think the discussion, and Heather just kind of brought it to light, is really divided up into home ownership versus just shelter and housing. What we're faced with right now, and I think what that study from Clark County is going to end up pointing out, is the entrance level for single family home ownership is eroding for those that can afford it. And that's where the building industry is most interested in, because this is what protects their margin. And they're going to be pressuring the concept of opening up additional land, using land costs as one of those levers to try and say they can lower the cost of housing. But it won't even budge in the concept of the people that are at the 80% and lower AMI, as Sirk pointed out. I think, Jesse, to your question, some of the things that could be done is in the concept of some really innovative thoughts towards the idea of development bonuses. If Hazeldale didn't have a ceiling on the height of how tall buildings could get, and you could give additional height based on the idea of including affordable units based on Sirk's definition of affordable, there would be a certain subsidy that would have to be put out by the builder, but it could be either added to a public share, or in the concept of saying that there would be some payment way to make it worthwhile. The other thing is in the concept of how expensive land is, the point out the idea of how much it gets paved over and sits idle. There's a lot of commercial land right now that has extremely large parking lots that could have several duplex or small multifamily dwellings put onto that existing commercial land and not impact the footprint of available parking significantly at all. You could go underground for new development and have that land not have to have the impact of more asphalt that is taking up space. I think there are some ideas, but they would require the concept of some of it being mandates, some of it being working with developers in forms of reward-based behaviors and things like that. But if you watch what's going to come out of the county thought process, they're not going to spend a lot of time talking about what we just heard here from Sirk. They're going to be talking about the price point for people going into starter homes. And that's where they're going to want to put the pressure on. So I think we have to be very vocal with the council that says, this isn't an emergency that they're looking at. There's an emergency they're not looking at. And we have to be able to put it in both terms for the idea that says, you want to work on the concept of starter home prices? Sure, there's several things that the county could do that would help lower the cost of that. But realistically, look at the volume of the population that is just being left out completely without anybody being their advocate in any respect. And then we have some way of starting to talk about how do we shelter those people with dignity in a concept that says it makes sense for us to be able to house them and have them be part of society. Those wages that Sirk showed in his presentation, that's the wage. I mean, even if you have 2 people at minimum wage working full time, requiring childcare, and they're somewhere, I think from Sirk's numbers, it would, if they were full time, they would be somewhere around $56,000. That still puts them in a position that makes it very, very difficult to be able to find housing in our society right now. And if you think about that, that is something that is our workforce, and we should be trying to protect them. Most of those people in that particular wage base in the workforce, a couple months ago, we were calling them essential. That's it.
Awesome. Did we have any other questions before we wrap up?
I have one.
What's up, Carolee?
So mostly for Sirk, but maybe other people have ideas. Sirk, you brought up the parking requirements, and I'm within the city of Vancouver, so that's all I know about. I don't know about out in the county, but they seem to be unreasonable. I have a piece of land with units on it, wanted to add more. You can see 2 bus lines from the property, but since I can't provide enough parking, I cannot add the 2 to 4 affordable units I would like to add. I wonder if you could just comment, and if you come up with any thoughts about how the system can be changed to make it feasible for someone like me to add a few units.
Carolee, I feel your pain, and Chuck knows my frustration. I've made plenty of enemies in the planning department trying to argue my way out of parking, but I have to be careful because I do have to continue doing business with them.
Yeah.
But in all fairness, I think we do, I mean, we need to change minds. And I think there are professional planners in the city that understand it, but they are also caught by, and I live in the city, they're also caught by plenty of people who are worried that they're not going to be able to park on the street, or they don't want cars parking on the street, you know, even on roads with bus lines. So it's not just trying to convince or change the inertia of the professional planners. You know, we have elected officials that are going to react to neighbors who think that their streets are going to be parked up.
What frustrates me, I think, is the units at McLaughlin and Maine, the Uptown or whatever they're calling it now. They don't have 1 parking space per unit, and they've got neighbors that are really upset about having so many people there. But they went ahead and built anyway. But I just want to do 2 to 4 units, and little old me, I'm not a big developer, but 2 to 4 affordable units could get 2 to 4 people or family into housing. So it's very frustrating for me from that perspective when you see others, oh, well, they're in some transportation zone. Okay, put me in the transportation zone.
Chuck can help with that.
Can you? All right, Chuck.
All right. Well, thank you all for your time. I want to be respectful of Sue and CIRC's investment in this and just say thank you both for contributing your thoughts and your knowledge. We will be sending out the slides, the recording, and contact information for them both so you can have follow-up conversations. Thank you all so much, and I look forward to seeing many of you soon.
Thank you. Good session.
Thank you.